Hi, my name is John Hayes. My wife Holiday and I have adopted 13 children, 10 of which are diagnosed with Fetal Alcohol Spectrum Disorder, FASD. I'd like to share with you today information that we have learned and parenting techniques that we use to feel successful in raising our children. To get the most out of this, we really recommend that you go to the website, which is www.hayskids.com. This will help you really get to the meat of what I will be sharing with you. I also have a part-time job working for Minnesota ASAP, which is Adoption Support and Preservation. It's been a wonderful job for me. I've gotten to go to some wonderful trainings. I've come in contact with wonderful teachers, but most importantly, with my job, I help families. Families call, sometimes it's because they're looking for services, which is good for me because then I have to do research to find services. It's also, I take a lot of crisis calls. Families, more often than not, that call me who are in crisis are raising children with FASD. One particular call I received once, and it's one of my favorites because it has a happy ending. The lady called and she just blurted out, "How long does God expect me to do this?" Kind of took me back, and I thought for a second, and I said, "Well, until you're absolutely sure that you're released. Tell me what's going on." And the lady went on to share that she didn't like this child anymore. She didn't love him. She didn't want to live with him. All she wanted to do was give him back, and she wanted to know, how do you give him back? So I shared with her that what she's feeling is not uncommon. What she needed was to become calm, that she needed respite, she needed to become involved with a support group, she needed to learn knowledge specific to the parenting technique specific to her son's diagnosis, that she needs a good, clear diagnosis, and that she needed hope. The first area I'd like to talk to you about is diagnosis. The earlier the diagnosis, the better. It helps them to understand their behaviors and their frustrations, and it helps you to understand their behaviors and their frustrations. As my wife said, it really helped when we got the one son diagnosed to understand that he functions on a 4 to 5-year-old level, even though he's in a 12-year-old body. She used to think he laid awake at night just trying to think of ways to sabotage the family. Well, he didn't. This was age appropriate. But without the diagnosis, we would not have understood that. It also helps you to get services. I remember one lady that I was talking to from the state of Washington. She said the first time she took her son into a therapist, as they were getting ready to leave, he handed her a book and said, "I think you need to go home and read this. I don't find anything at all wrong with your son, but you have a lot of problems." Well, later he did get a diagnosis of fetal alcohol spectrum disorder. It gives you something to learn about. Remember, I said you need to learn about parenting techniques specific to the diagnosis. One of the questions that sometimes gets asked after a diagnosis is whether or not you should tell them. Personally, we feel it's very important to tell them. It helps raise their self-esteem. It makes them feel better about themselves. It helps them to understand why they do some of the things that they do. Not too long ago, one Sunday afternoon at church, our daughter was outside, and all of a sudden I heard this screaming, and I ran out there, and she had thrown this stick up on a pile, and there was this gentleman trying to get her to get it down. She couldn't. She freaked out at that point, and so I became her courage, and I went over with her and I helped her get it, and then she put it over next to the building. Well, later in the day, she was talking to my wife, and she said, she just started crying, and she said, "Mom, I don't understand. I don't know why I do these things. I feel so bad about it." And then she stopped and she says, I do know why I do these things. It's because I've got fetal alcohol. It's because my birth mom drunk. And now I'll never be able to get married. I'll never be able to have children. And I'm going to have to live with you and Dad the rest of my life. And I don't know what I'll do if anything ever happens to you. A lot of very mature conversation going on there. People say, well, I don't want to label my child. I don't want to label them FASD. Well, the problem is if you don't get a good, clear diagnosis, a good, clear label, they're going to end up getting labeled. In school, they'll be labeled troublemaker. There's a good chance they'll be labeled sex offender. There's a good chance they'll be labeled prisoner at some point, because 60% are dead or in prison by the age of 30. So it's important to get a good label, an honest label. 95% are misdiagnosed in the beginning as having ADHD. I remember our one daughter, we had to take her in, we were taking her into the clinic, and part of her fetal alcohol diagnosis was to go through an ADHD clinic testing, screening. And yes, she is extremely hyperactive. She even tore the curtains off the wall in this place because she was running around so much. But it's important to get a good diagnosis. There's a boy recently I was being told about. He's 18 years old. He's been diagnosed as hyperactive attention deficit all of his life. And just now, they've given him a fetal alcohol spectrum disorder diagnosis. And it explains so much more about why he's done the things that he has done. So a good diagnosis is extremely important. Next, I'd like to speak to you about services. This becomes really important, especially in your child's future. Not only do they need services today, but you need to be looking at the future. Here in Minnesota, we have a program called the PCA program, Personal Care Attendant. Individuals actually come into our house to work with our children. They teach them life skills. They help them to function. They become the courage to help them to do things. I have a daughter who can fold towels, but she just throws fits and she cannot emotionally handle folding the towels. But if she has someone with her, an adult with her, her PCA, then she's able to function. She's able to do this. Other services that are available, there's waivers, the MRRC, which is mental retardation or related condition. There's the CADI waiver. These services are extremely important, especially later in the child's life when they need assisted living, because these are funding streams and they follow the child for their entire life. Other things to look at, services to look for, is therapists, is counselors, is you can go to the DD department, developmental delay department at your social services, and find out what do they have available. Also, children's mental health is another excellent place to look. And as you become better at this, and you're looking in more and more places, you become a better advocate, which not only helps your child, but it helps you also. Next, I'd like to talk to you about support groups. Some people say, well, no, I don't want to become a support group. It means I need help. The truth is, we do need help. You know, one of the things that happens many times when someone new comes into a support group, the first time they're there, as they're getting ready to leave, they laugh and they say, you mean I'm not alone? You know, it's so wonderful to find out that other parents are going through the same thing, that I'm not crazy. It's a place where people understand what you're going through. It's a chance sometimes we laugh, and sometimes we even cry together. It's a chance for brainstorming, coming up with ideas that help you in your parenting. It's a chance to help other parents in what they're doing. Sometimes it's a peek into your future as you listen to parents talk who have children older than you. Or it's a peek back into your past as you're hearing parents talk about things that they're now going through. It's a chance truly to help other people and to get help. You know, one of the problems that parents have, especially when they adopt or bring a child into their home who has fetal alcohol spectrum disorder, is that their behaviors are such that other people don't want their kids to be around them, or they don't want to be around your new kids. So a lot of times you end up getting new friends. I remember one story, I got a call from a lady once, and we were talking, and I said something about friends, and she said, "Boy, you've got that right." She said, "We'd gone to this church for 14 years, and one Sunday morning, two of the elders met us at the door and said we were still welcome, but our 5-year-old daughter was no longer welcome there." Now, what should have happened was they should have said, from now on, one of us is going to stay with your daughter and help her. But instead, they just wanted out. Also, there's support that each of us need to be looking at individuals or as a family to get support. I know in our case, when my wife and I leave home together, there's 8 different adults who help take care of our kids. Some of them are paid adults and some of them are just volunteers. But it's important to build a support group around you. I'd now like to talk to you about respite, which means time off. A lot of what we do, it's very stressful, and we need time off. We actually become better parents with time off. The other day I was talking to a lady whose son freaked out and had busted out the windows in the house and busted out the window in the car, and he had to go away to residential treatment for a while. And I was talking to her about that, and she said, one of the things I realized was that how worn down I was, and I didn't have the reserve, and I wasn't keeping on top of things the way I should have been. I was letting him get away with things that he shouldn't have been getting away with, and that's part of what caused him to go off the way that he did. Amongst adoptive parents, the divorce rate is actually higher than it is in the nation as a whole. Here we have these parents who really want to help and really want to do good, and they end up with a higher divorce rate. Well, respite is one of the things that they can do to help ensure that not happening. One of the things also is taking many respites. It can be a place in your home you go to. It can be sending the kids to bed early. It can be scheduled time off. I feel that it's really important. One of my jobs is to make sure that my wife gets time off almost every day. And so I make it a point to say, "Have you had your time off?" And she said to me the other day, "I don't understand it. If I take a half hour to an hour off in the afternoon and I lay down, rest, I read something, I actually end up getting more done in the day than what I would have." So scheduling some time off is very important. When you do take respite, you do get away, don't overschedule yourself. Don't drive far away because you need a break. You don't need to come back worn out. And when you're away, don't spend all your time talking about the kids. Talk about yourself. Court each other again. One of the things I've heard people say is, "Well, I don't want to take respite because then I'll be away from my kids." And that doesn't seem normal. It seems that we should be involved with each other's life. Part of the bonding process should be getting involved with each other. And that sounds nice, but the truth is you do need time away. Your kids need some time away also. It's a break for everyone. And a lot of times when my kids are taking respite, I send them somewhere where they're having fun, that it's a special thing, it's a special time. Most importantly though, it's a time for my wife and I to have time away. We're not living in a little white house with a little white picket fence. So respite needs to be part of your plan. And as a family unit, you will be better off if you take respite. Calm. It's at times it's really difficult to be calm, and at other times it's completely impossible. But it's ever so important. When you're not calm, you build a wall between you and your child. You need to tell them and you need to show them, you need to prove it to them that you're on their side, that you're not just out to get them. And when you blow it, you need to apologize. One professional once said to me, she said, "The less I say and the calmer I say it, the more effective it is." I think that I tell my wife, if I can remain calm enough long enough, we can work through most any issue, most whatever is happening. a calm story that's funny. One time, one of my sons was throwing a fit, so I sent him up to his room, and he went up there, and after a little while, my wife came down. He was throwing a fit while he was up there. He was yelling and things, and she came down and she said, "Why'd you yell at him?" And I said, "What? I don't think I did." And she said, "Well, I went up and I went in to talk to him to try to calm him down, and he said that you yelled at him." 20 minutes later or so, I went up and I was talking to him, and I said, "Well, what happened?" And, trying to get to the bottom of it. And why did he get so upset? And he says, "Well, you were yelling at me, and then Mom came upstairs and came into my room, and she started yelling at me too." So I went back downstairs and I said to my wife, and I said, "Why'd you yell at him?" She said, "I didn't yell at him." So sometimes it's perceived that way, but it's really important to be as calm as possible. Hope. Without hope, you're in trouble. All too often, I tell parents, you need to feel good about your parenting. And all too often when I say that, I can feel them thinking, I'm just trying to survive. What do you mean feel good about your parenting? Tell me something to help. I want a silver bullet. That people think, well, they can take a drug or they can do something to help this child. Well, all too often, what really will help, if there is a silver bullet, it's parenting techniques. It's changing the environment, changing the way you think about them. One of the things that we do in our home to help us have hope is we look at what frustrates us. What is their actions that are frustrating us? And then we set out to find solutions for them. Doctors practice medicine. Well, we practice parenting. Sometimes the solution is just accepting it. Sometimes the solution is changing the environment so it's not even an issue anymore. Eliminate temptations. Years ago, it's back before I knew what I was doing. One time at Christmas time, we'd gotten this big bag of candy, and I left it out. And I told people, only eat one when you have permission. And I noticed they just kept disappearing. And I was foolish enough to think, well, if I leave it out, I'll be able to find out who did it. Not anymore. From now on, I just eliminate the temptation. So we need to strive to feel good about our parenting, and if we do that, we will have hope.